Okay,
Everyone.
hello. So to begin the conversation, I will start by reading Columbia Land Conservancy's land acknowledgement. We humbly and gratefully acknowledge that Columbia County, New York is predominantly on the ancestral lands of the Stockbridge-Munsee Band of Mohicans, who are the indigenous people of this land. They were subject to genocide, coerced into assimilation, and forcibly removed from their homelands to what is now known as Wisconsin. They continue to retain their unbroken status as a sovereign Native nation. Despite removal, they continue to hold relationships with their homelands and settler communities. As a land trust and the current steward of this place, CLC understands that access to land is a sacred and collective right. CLC recognizes the Indigenous history of this land, honors ancestors past and present, and supports current efforts to build more equitable spaces for all the human and non-human relatives who call this place home. Thank you. It's now my pleasure to introduce this evening's speakers, Sam Calhoun and Blake Hill. Sam Calhoun joined CLC in 2020. As the Conservation Programs Manager, he partners with farmers and landowners to protect land using voluntary conservation agreements. He also works to acquire new properties for public access or habitat protection. Sam is especially passionate about creating opportunities for farmers to find affordable land. He received a bachelor's degree from Ithaca College and a master's degree from Bard College's environmental policy, where his thesis focused on innovative models of agricultural land protection. We are also joined by Blake Hill. Blake Hill has been a grower for over a decade and growing cut flowers specifically for the past 8 years. Blake has experience managing various flower growing operations for other businesses in the region. However, for the past 4 years, he's been developing and building his own venture, Hussman Hollow Flower Farm, to help fill the need for locally grown seasonal flowers in the Hudson Valley. Before moving here, Blake has gathered growing experience in many areas of the country, including Northern California, Austin, Texas, and Southeastern Pennsylvania. In the winter of 2023, Blake and his business were selected to purchase a CLC property located in Livingston, New York. Blake moved his flower operation onto the land in the spring of 2024 and just completed his first season in Livingston this past fall. Blake looks forward to continuing to develop roots in Columbia County community as he further establishes his business and his family in the coming year. With that, it is my pleasure to pass the mic on to Sam. Again, thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Mallory. My name's Sam Calhoun. I'm the Conservation Programs Manager at CLC, and I'm excited to share with you all a little bit more about this project tonight. So what I'm planning to do is sort of do an overview of the process that we completed to complete this project, and there's a lot of information all at once, so I'll run through that and then happy to answer questions in greater detail at the end during the Q&A. So next slide, please. Oh, there we go. We missed one, but that's okay. I don't know why that one's blank, but we'll move on. What I'm going to call this project tonight is the Hussman Hollow Flower Farm project, and really the goal of the project was to create an affordable farm unit for resale to a local farmer. We did not have Blake's in mind or his business in mind when we sort of initially began this process, but for the purposes of this presentation, that's what we'll call it. And so the project really is based on a approach to farmland protection called Buy, Protect, Sell. And that's when a conservation organization like CLC will buy land, typically farmland, place a conservation easement on it to reduce its value by restricting its development rights, and then reselling that land at a reduced value to a farmer in an effort to create an opportunity for a farmer to purchase land at a reduced cost. Our project was a little bit different in that it began with a donation. So we skipped the buy aspect of the buy, protect, sell, which is often the sort of most challenging piece of the puzzle. And it created a great opportunity for us to turn a donation into an opportunity for someone else to come onto land and to grow. So you'll see the three sort of steps in our process were first the donation, then our search for a farmer, which yielded us Blake, and then moving on to the actual sale and transfer of the property to Blake. So those are the steps we took. So we can go through each of those. Next slide, please. So first we worked through a donation, and sort of the story of this property is that a donor had, someone who would eventually become the donor had purchased this property that you see on your screen on the right here at a county foreclosure sale. And it had been divided into 4 lots with the intention of selling those lots individually for 4 different building sites. The property had been part of a larger local farm, and the donor had purchased it with the intention of possibly siting a house there. Ultimately, they decided not to do that, and instead approached CLC about conservation opportunities for the property. So we worked with the donor for a couple months to explore options. Some sort of interesting characteristics to note about the property that are unique is that it's a lot smaller than a property that CLC would typically consider for protection. It's about 14.5 acres. And a lot of our conservation projects are on larger acreage farms or large acreage sort of forested properties, things like that. So it was a little bit unique to CLC from the onset. Throughout our conversations with the donor, we also sort of uncovered a desire for that piece of property to be passed along to a farmer, if possible, sort of recognizing the history of the land. And CLC staff sort of worked and identified an opportunity to use a conservation easement that incorporated affordability provisions to try to create a small affordable farm unit that could be sold to a farmer at a price that they could pay just to establish secure land tenure and get established farmer ownership. As part of the donation process, we also worked through sort of a property evaluation and some sort of unique aspects of this property that made it viable from a farming perspective were the soil types present on the property, which were quite good. The proximity to Hudson, a bigger market in our county, and its location centrally in the county made sense. Access to water, and I don't know if you can see on the map there, the eastern boundary of the property is the Taconic Creek, so easy access to water for a producer. And working with some local farmers, we determined, yes, this piece, despite its size, in your maybe initial read, could really feasibly work for a small farm unit and host a business and really be a foothold for a farmer in the county who didn't otherwise have secure tenure. So all of that being true, we decided to accept the donation from the donor and took that gift at the end of 2021. So that was sort of the donation aspect of the project. Next slide, please. And then after the donation, we started working on our farmer search. So CLC staff developed and released a request for proposals to a network of local farmers who we knew about already from our work in farmland access and farmland protection, as well as through many of the partner organizations that we work with on farmland access. To try to sort of disseminate that RFP as far and wide as we could. We hosted 2 open houses of the property. I met with dozens of farmers who were interested in acquiring the land, worked with them to help them better understand the opportunity, the process that CLC had planned for the property. And ultimately, we accepted 10 proposals from farmers who were interested in purchasing the property. Each of those proposals were evaluated using a shared rubric by the committee, an independent committee or partially independent committee, the makeup of which you can see there. And through that ranking and evaluation, Blake's proposal rose to the top. I will note one of the sort of focuses of the RFP was to find a farmer who had not previously had secure land tenure or ownership of a piece of property. And we also had a focus on conveying the farm to a local farmer, so someone who had been farming in the Hudson Valley and who we might know who's maybe farming in our community already. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, Blake's proposal, the Hussman Hollow Flower Farm, sort of rose to the top, and that was for a couple of reasons. One was the size of his operation was really appropriate for the property, and his business proposal sort of demonstrated his ability to utilize the property, but also grow on the property, as well as the sort of attention paid to environmental health and farming practices that were congruent with conservation. So those were sort of 2 of the stronger aspects of Blake's proposal that the committee noted. And so we notified Blake and began working with him on sort of the sale. But before the sale, we had to work through the conservation easement itself. So that consisted of conversations with Blake about land planning or where on the property development can continue to happen. Things like where might he build a house? Where would additional agricultural infrastructure go? You might have noticed the property that that property is vacant, so there is sort of a blank slate. Really trying to understand what Blake's needs were going to be, and then designing the easement in a way that would facilitate that sort of operation in his business. We also worked in really to understand and through the preemptive purchase right language, and that's really the meat of the project. So like I mentioned at the beginning, the easement included affordability provisions, and that is called a preemptive purchase right. So what a preemptive purchase right does that a sort of traditional agricultural conservation easement might not is restrict future sales of the property. And it does that in a couple of ways. It requires that the property, when sold, be passed down to another qualified farmer. And it requires that it be sold at its agricultural value. That value is determined by an appraiser who's basically asking what would a farmer pay for this land in terms of its agricultural productivity, its potential for productivity. And I'm happy to delve more into the details of preemptive purchase right in the Q&A if people have interest, but for now, kind of keep it simple. So we worked with Blake to sort of put together the conservation easement before the sale. We also worked with him to address some challenges around financing. So this is a fairly non-typical transaction, and it raised some eyebrows or some challenges from lenders who didn't quite grasp what we were trying to do. And that delayed us a little bit in terms of Blake securing financing, and we worked together to sort of address that. And ultimately, while it was a major sort of delay to closing, it was important that we work through that and find a lender who could support the project and really understood the intention behind it. While that delay was happening, though, we leased the property to Blake so he could start establishing himself on the land and putting up infrastructure and ultimately, grow in the 2024 season on the property. And then finally, in July of 2024, we were able to officially sell the property to Blake. And I just for illustrative purposes, we sold the property to Blake for $42,000, which is the restricted value of the property, that agricultural value. And the value of the property at the time of donation was about $140,000. So that's the power that the preemptive purchase right can play in making farms more affordable for farmers who want to access land. Next slide. And so sort of what's the future of the project? Well, Blake now owns it outright, and the property is subject to the conservation easement with the preemptive purchase right. So it will ensure that, in perpetuity, this farm will continue to be farmer owned, and be sold at a rate that hopefully, maintains affordability over time. And we'll continue to maintain a relationship with Blake, and our obligation is to monitor and enforce the terms of the easement in perpetuity, which is typical of any other conservation project that CLC does. And in the meantime, we're looking to replicate this sort of model whenever possible. This particular project was a real opportunity for us, given the donation at the onset. Purchasing land to do this sort of thing is a challenge for organizations like us who might not have capital on hand to buy farms on the open market, might not be able to absorb the loss of value that a preemptive purchase right poses. So, this was a great opportunity, and we hope we can do it again. So that's my short summary, and happy to answer questions. But at this point, I think I'll pass it to Blake so he can tell you his side of the story.
Great. Thanks, Sam. Yeah, hi, I'm Blake. I am the owner operator of Hussman Hollow Flower Farm. And I'm going to kind of touch on what we're doing on the property now, kind of explain a little bit about my business and what we're doing, and then kind of giving what Sam went through for CLC's perspective, kind of touching on how it was for me and my lens into that process of working with CLC to secure this land purchase for our business, so we could really kind of sink in and kind of actualize our vision for our business. And then I'll kind of also touch a little bit about, or talk a little bit about what we kind of envision happening for us on this property moving forward. And then I think that'll kind of conclude what I have to say, and we can talk more on anything that's of interest to you in the Q&A section after that. Next slide, Terrence. Great, that's a picture of the farm as we were building it before growing on it. Oh, you can go, but yeah, that's the first high tunnel that we put up, and then we have another one over here that we kind of use for season extension of tulips specifically, that small one to the right. Next slide, Terrence. Yeah, a little bit about us. Hussman Hollow Flower Farm. We on this property are growing on approximately 3 acres. We solely grow cut flowers currently, and probably forever, but 3 acres of cut flowers. We grow over 75 different varieties seasonally, so we kind of work from April through March, April through October, November. And most of our product is moved currently into the New York City wholesale market down on 28th Street, which is historically like a flower market. It's in the process of kind of changing, but that is it still is predominantly a flower market. And then we also are moving product through a newly formed flower collective in the Hudson Valley, and we are a founding member of that. And we're really hoping that that's a way to kind of source more of our product locally moving forward. And a lot of that wholesale is to designers that operate and work around different areas of the Hudson Valley. But that's been a really successful outlet for us as well. After last year was its 2nd year, and it really took off. And we're hoping that that can kind of be a point for growth for us and the collective moving forward. Some of the things that we utilize or have started to utilize on the property are a few high tunnels. A few things why we use high tunnels. for us, it helps extend seasons of our flowers. So we load our high tunnels up in the fall. We don't have any active plants flowering because they are unheated. And so we plant in December, and we're going to plant again in the middle to end of February, and that allows us to have plants growing in the colder seasons. And they're not growing up top, but they kind of are setting roots in the ground over winter, and then as the days extend and the temperatures start to rise, we start to see that growth above ground happening. And that allows us to kind of, we usually grow ranunculus in there, and that allows us to kind of start cutting those flowers around April. And we start moving those down to the city and offering those to the designers and different folks to the collective as well in April. And then another high tunnel we stock full of tulips, and that just allows us to force the harvest of those tulips a little earlier, so that we go 30,000 tulips, or we will this year, and so half of them are in that high tunnel, which will allow us to offset the harvest. So some will be earlier, and then the other half of them will be outside and kind of probably be 3 to 4 weeks later than the ones inside the tunnel, and that just helps us control harvest a little bit better and product, because they last for a little while, but it helps us spread out that harvest and allows us to sell not all of them at once. And the high tunnels also allow us to extend our harvests past fall frosts, and we do that with dahlias and mums as well. Some of our seasonal offerings, like I said, we kind of grow from April through November, and a lot of that we're doing, we do a lot of bulbs. Like I said, 30,000 tulips. We also have tons of narcissus and a few other varieties of perennial bulbs. But then we do 2 high tunnels full of ranunculus, which ends up being approximately like 15 to 20,000 between the two. Yeah, probably 15,000 ranunculus flowers that we will grow throughout the spring and into the early parts of the summer. Another aspect and benefit of the high tunnels kind of transition us, or goes into that last point of we really do focus on healthy growing practices on the farm, and high tunnels offer us the ability to kind of mitigate areas of erosion of our soil, so we can really focus on building up the soils in those high tunnels for really kind of focus on specific fertilities, and we allow that to kind of those high tunnels allow us a space to prevent erosion and also kind of leaching of different nutrients and things that we use in our flowers and the growing of that growing environment. We have to be careful because it's not naturally drained with rain, so there can be potential for buildup of salts or things like that. So occasionally we will every few years we take off that plastic to kind of allow the winter rains and snow to kind of flush that stuff. But high tunnels allow us to kind of really have a controlled environment that can be beneficial for the soils and the growing areas of our farm. But we also are not certified organic. Now that we are on this property, that is a goal that I would love to have in the next few years, is to really kind of focus on getting an organic certification. However, we do follow not pretty, like to the T organic matters. We don't spray anything that wouldn't be certified organic. We don't add anything to our soil that would be not considered organic. And we really kind of like focus on longer lasting fertility options as opposed to quick bursts. There are organic options for those kind of quick boosts if needed, but we really kind of are looking at soil samples. We pull an annual soil sample to kind of see what we need to either add, or just to kind of ensure that we're adding and progressing in the ways that we want to see the numbers for fertility and organic matter increasing over time, which is our goal. And we do that through cover cropping is a very important aspect of our farm, not only overwintering, but then also between crops if we can, between seasons, to really kind of help mitigate weed pressure and also increase that organic matter of the soil. And yeah, like I said, through those soil tests that we pull each year, we really are kind of looking at different macronutrients in the soil, but the number one indicator for us is the percentage of organic matter that we're finding in our soil is kind of a good indicator of us following the proper practices. And so as Sam mentioned previously, that is something that I articulated in that RFP that we submitted, is that's kind of a huge goal for us. That's kind of one of the aspects that we want to focus on, not only as a viable business, but just kind of someone that's really kind of focusing on land stewardship as we are using that soil and that land to grow the products that we want and need. Terrence, next slide, please. A little bit about the process with CLC. As Sam stated, as this land was being offered to the community, they put out an RFP. I was keen to it because we were at the process at our other location of we ran into we were kind of competing for access to land with another farm business that was growing at the same time. And through a few different things, we were kind of quickly realizing that we weren't going to be able to grow in the ways that we wanted to with the offerings, the land offerings that we had available to us at that property. So the fall of the year that the RFPs were put out, we were actively seeking another option for land, and we were looking for any sort of, we just needed to, we knew we couldn't continue to be there kind of almost immediately. We could finish that season, but didn't really see a path forward for us on that property. And so this became available, and I went to go look at it. And then as I saw the property and I envisioned, what I could envision what I was thinking for our business, this piece of property really perfectly fit kind of size-wise, location-wise. Like I said, we sell a lot of our product in New York City, and we are 3 minutes from the Taconic from this property, and that is the road that takes us right into the city. So there's a perfect location for us, perfect size for us. And we really could see ourselves growing into that, not only the business, but then kind of like really settling roots into that piece of property for us to like be there going forward. And as I said, we were kind of in a position to where it's like, all right, we needed to find land for our business to kind of continue operating as it did. And I never envisioned the possibility of owning a piece of property. However, after submitting that proposal, it really does. I feel very grateful and lucky to be able to have been selected and be able to now have a piece of property that I never thought would be possible for us moving forward. And so it really, in a huge way, kind of allowed us to really continue to grow our business in the way that we wanted to. That who knows what our other options or things would have been. So this kind of really worked out perfectly for us at a time that we really were needing and seeking, an option that would allow us to move forward, and owning it and securing that is something that we didn't have before. And like I said, who knows if it would have been possible in other ways, but this was a huge asset for us that we were kind of not expecting as a possibility for us. And yeah, so when we were selected, we were kind of working with a lender that we were just running into issues with. And so in that interim time, we were leasing the property to kind of, as Sam said, get set up. And we were really, as you can see in this picture, we had a neighbor farmer willing to come down and till the soil for us. And this was tilled for us. And then from here, we cover cropped this that fall with the hopes of, not the hopes, we did grow on it starting in the spring of 2024. And we were able to build a high tunnel for spring production in that season too. And so through that leasing, we were able to kind of like access the property and really kind of move forward with our business on that property. And then we, as we were working through that financing, we had to kind of pivot from the initial option that we were hoping would come through. And through kind of different things, it just didn't work out for us. But we then pivoted to a local bank that had worked with CLC before, and they, as Sam said, kind of understood the kind of sale that this was, what was the kind of sale that was happening for us on this with this property. And so we're able to finance it, and we just kind of once we decided to go with that lender, it moved more quickly than the other one. But yeah, so we were able to kind of close in July of 2024, and yeah, now we are able to kind of work this property and this land moving forward in a way that like we are now kind of feel really good about investing in ourselves and in this property and kind of really actualizing the investment in our work and just all the things that we're trying to do, which is we're truly grateful for that. Next slide, Terrence. And then a little bit about us moving into the future is that with this property and the location of this property, we're really trying to move away from predominantly New York City sales. I think that'll still always remain a big part of our business, just the nature of New York City being a kind of endless area of demand for what we produce. But we do really want to focus now that we are closer to the river and more population in the county, being able to offer a product more locally through the collective, but then also finding more brick and mortar options or just like event spaces that we can kind of allow our flowers into, or will allow our flowers to be into. Another option that we're hoping for is on farm. As I started this business, I always felt it was important and kind of felt good to me to offer a space or like allow people into our space, kind of an inclusive thing for people to interact with flowers, whether that's on-site farm store, pickup of a CSA, or you pick options. All of these things are kind of floating around as possibility. It's kind of once we establish ourselves, those are the kinds of next steps for us. We're hoping that we can offer on the farm. Yeah, and with that, I think I'm finished. If we can go to Q&A stuff. I believe I'm done. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Blake. Thank you, Sam. Give a little round of applause. I know people without their cameras on, they're doing the same thing at home. Thank you both. So we're going to transition now into the Q&A portion of our time together. So when I see people doing the clap react, thanks everybody. So if any of you have had any questions throughout the call, I would encourage you to go to the bottom of your screen. There should be a little box that says Q&A. You can type your questions in, and if we have time, we'll have Blake and Sam answer them live. We already have one question, which is wondering, that's for Blake, and it's wondering what is the history and meaning of the farm's name?
Well, Hussman is, I don't think, the actual way of pronunciation, but it is actually during the pandemic, I continued with my family a kind of exploration of where our family came from. And we have family in Norway that have a farm. They're dairy farmers, and they have been farming for a long time. And in the past few years, actually, family has made it over there. But Hussman, or some sort of iteration of that word, is a word of that region that basically was used to describe in feudal times the folks that tended the land of the landowners, and so they basically used that land for subsistence existence, and they kind of lived on the property. They farmed that property in exchange for kind of like offering excess to the landowner, or offering. So they basically tended the lands of the landowners, and that kind of felt like a very, like I said, I didn't ever expect to own property, so I was kind of working other people's property, and it just felt as though that was an appropriate name for the farm, and that's kind of how I started it. And it just kind of stuck. I always thought like, oh, this could be a starting point, but it just kind of has stayed. So that's that.
Fantastic. Thank you. I have another question for you, Blake. One person is wondering if you are seeing any trends in the kinds of flowers people are interested in buying, and if you have a favorite flower that you grow.
Yeah, that's a funny, yeah, there's flower trends. And for me, conversations with we're constantly in conversation with designers, the wholesaler, and then also kind of other farmers of just seeing what they are growing, or kind of are there things that aren't being grown that there's a demand for. And there's always things where people are like, we want roses, but roses aren't necessarily an easy thing to grow here. But then you kind of get in your head, like, could I grow roses? But a lot of the trends are flower specific varieties, but then a lot of it is color. So, everyone's going to want ranunculus, but what color of ranunculus? So that's kind of the thing that changes every year. And you usually try to stay a step ahead. But a good tip from me, or what I've learned, is ask the design, because the designers are booking weddings or events a year plus out. So asking them what those people are asking for. So say, like, we're planning currently for the 2025 season, but I am starting to ask the designers, like, what are they seeing is happening in 2026, so that I can put that into my idea of like looking forward, because you always want to stay ahead of it. But there are certain flowers too that are always in demand, or other flowers like blushy pastel-y colors are always kind of in demand. But then this year, people are really interested in quote unquote brown flowers, which are kind of like so there's a big trend this year for like brownish flowers. So that's kind of a thing, but there's always ways to find out. And yeah, there's a lot of conversations with people, so you can figure that out. In terms of what I like to grow, I really love ranunculus. That's one of my favorites. We do a lot of ranunculus. They're pretty easy and they last for a really long time, which is kind of my favorite thing, where they don't require a lot and they last for a long time. And I also really like Ami. We grow a lot of Ami. I don't know why I like it. I just do. And then another one that I really like is there's varieties of cosmos that I love growing cosmos, and I like the whimsical nature of that flower. It's not necessarily a focal flower, but I think that they're whimsical, and they are just very nice and very delicate in a way that I like. So those are the three main flowers that we grow that I really like.
Or would I guess brown would be a hot wedding season color?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. They're not an actual brown. They are like brown, but it's like a muted kind of terracotta-ish color. It's nice. Some flower color brown is nice, but not all. Mhm. But
So
yeah,
the next two questions here are for Sam. So one person is wondering how many applications from farmers did CLC have for the property? And a secondary question, can answer these separately, is if someone is wondering if there's a minimum amount of land for donation consideration, and if woodland is a viable option for this type of program, Sam.
Great. So the first question, remind me the first question.
How many farmers applied for the
Okay,
property?
okay. So we received 10 proposals ultimately of folks who really threw their name in the hat to purchase the property, but I probably spoke with upwards of 30 farmers. A lot of them were able to determine that the property wasn't right for them. It wouldn't be big enough to support their operation, or wasn't in the location that they were ultimately hoping to be in. So I think some farmers sort of self-selected out of the actual proposal process. It was also quite involved in terms of what to put together to submit. But yeah, we ended up with 10 actual proposals. And then to the second question, minimum acreage, at least in terms of farmland, I think every property is different. It's sort of context specific. I think I would even maybe defer to Blake, like if there's a minimum amount of acres for a farm to own and work on. But I think, even something like 3-5 acres of good, productive farmland can be, enough to establish an operation, and maybe there's an opportunity to add to acreage to that as well. But not being a farmer myself, I don't know like what the sort of number in a farmer's head might be of this is the minimum amount of acreage that I need to really feel like a property is worth my investment or my time. And then to the question about woodlands, I think that's a little bit trickier. It's harder, I think, to imagine a farmer coming onto a property that's dominated by forested land, but again, every property is different. Maybe there is opportunity, even if the primary makeup of the property is forest. You know, farmers are creative folks, I find.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam. Another more process-based question comes from Peter, and he's wondering, based on this specific land acquisition process, would you recommend, actually it's for Blake too, would you recommend to other farmers considering this type of ownership and transfer?
Is that directed to me specifically, or is that for Sam?
It was vague, so I'll let you both answer.
Sam, you want to go first, or?
I think you go first. What do you think? You're the farmer.
Yeah, I definitely think that this is a viable option, and I mean, kind of, like I said, I don't think I would have been able to plan to purchase a piece of property without this help. As Sam said, with a lot of farm businesses, without this style of easement and CLC offering that to the farmer, I mean, $140,000 is a pretty significant chunk of a small growing business. Some farmers are established in that kind of thing, but within your first 4 or 5 years, I don't think there's very many farm businesses that just have whatever would be required of them to put down and then get a loan, and that can be prohibitive for not all, but I think it would have been hard for us to kind of at this stage of our business secure a loan for something that valued the original value of that property. So this is a very viable and very helpful way for farmers to kind of gain land security for sure. And yeah, I think if possible, it would be great for other opportunities moving forward through CLC or for something else for farmers. But yeah, this is a super helpful and very viable option.
As a follow-up to that, Sam, how might folks on the call with us today or folks listening to the recording after the fact, how might they support CLC and other land conservancies in doing this work?
Yeah, so if you have farmland you want to donate to us, we are all ears. Recognizing that might not be everyone on the call, but certainly gifts of land are one way to do it. I think also there are opportunities to support this kind of model in your local communities. I don't know if any of them have things like community preservation funds where you could utilize funds to support this kind of project. But those are sort of town directed. So I'm sure if there's opportunity to weigh in on what those funds are used for, that would be a great way for leveraging those funds to create, really incredible outcomes for farmers. I know they've been able to do some of that in Red Hook to support protection of farmland. And I know the community preservation funds are increasingly becoming more common. So that would be another way. And yeah, aside from giving us money to purchase farmland, those are the things that come to mind immediately.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. We have a few more questions here for Blake. One person says, first off, congratulations. And they're wondering if there's any reason to have heated high tunnels for an even longer season, but they give the caveat that if you need a winter break, that's also understandable.
I do, and I want that. Yeah, there are a lot. So with the heated tunnels, you can. So if I had heated tunnels for the things that I grow, I could probably start having ranunculus Valentine's Day-ish, a little after that maybe. And I know that there are flower growers that are really looking to, not looking, they are doing it. Like there are people that are producing flowers now in, you know, from right around here that are selling it to the New York City market right now. So like you can do it with higher temperatures. I've done it at other places that I've worked, and we would just keep it above freezing, and that really speeds up the thing too. So you can kind of, with the different temperatures that you could choose, you can move it along, and like you can force tulips earlier by, like, people are growing tulips in crates right now, and so there are people that are yeah, using that to the heat to grow and have cut flowers now. There is a cost to that. I was doing it for a couple years ago. I tried to do it in overwinter, and I think it was a cold winter like this, and you get a $800 bill for gas in a month, and you're just like, that's not, it can be worth it, but it's not what I was expecting. And so I kind of like pulled that, and it was just like, I'm just gonna wait. It was tulip bulbs, and I was hoping to force them earlier, but there's cost to it. But one thing I am interested in is like a geothermal heating thing, which is expensive up front, but then it's free energy. I mean, there's energy for pumping the air from the earth, but that's an option too. That is something I'm interested in exploring moving forward. But yeah, I want the break, so I've kind of decided that I don't want to have that, but I am interested in maybe starting in March-ish or something. But yeah, I want a break.
Totally fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have another question for you, Blake, asking what process you use to secure your customer base for the flower sales.
Well, I have a guy in New York City that I've been working with since I started growing for another farm in 2019. So I basically I went down there and literally just introduced myself with some flowers and said, I have these, would you be interested? And he was, and so I started selling to him at another farm. Then I left that job and started working with another farm who already had a wholesaler down there. But when I started my own business, I reached back out to this guy, and he literally will buy everything that I can cut and rate to him. And then with the collective, what's nice is that I've also done at other farms where I am kind of building that, sending out emails each week to the groups of people that I have brought in. And that's kind of, again, just kind of like reaching out, getting customers based off of other people that I know that have told me that they want to buy stuff, or customers passing me along to things. But I've built up a email list of people. Again, I'm not quite into that. That's a lot of work right now. So the collective is a great outlet for that, but I'm funneling people that way. So if people are inquiring about flowers, it's often I will give them to the collective, and then that allows them access to many different growers. But mostly through the city, I just went down and introduced myself, and then the collective does a lot of that work for us, where they're reaching out or they're fielding inquiries. If we get them individually, we just kind of pass them along to the collective, and they do that work for us, because that can be a huge amount of work. And it's me and one other person that do a lot of the work on the farm, and we don't have the capacity to kind of email as much as would be required for that. So that's why we do the wholesale model to the city. It's very minimal communication, and the collective fits that model too for us.
Great. Would you be able to tell us more about the collective?
Yeah. So we are a collection. I think there's 6 growers right now, and we may be adding a few more. We have a few on the other side of the river, and then 3 or 4 of us over here. And so we have a weekly offering. We upload to a website, and buyers have access to our listing. And we are hoping to expand a little bit further outside of, I think we're in Dutchess, Ulster, Green, and Columbia right now. Hopefully expanding a little bit further out from there. But there's 6 of us, and we do a lot of we move a lot of product. I think there's, I don't know, over 50 buyers, maybe even more than that, for sure. But it's to get onto it, you can go to the website, and I think you have to have some sort of resale certificate or something. But there are a lot of options for people. It's pretty easy to do that. But there's a lot of growers, and we're usually online by March. People have stuff to offer, and then through November, I think we keep our sites up. So we have pretty long season over there. But the collective is in its third season now. And yeah, it's a really great option for us as growers, but then also for the buyers. There's a lot of great product that's available through that.
So, this question is for Sam, and someone is wondering how many other regional land trusts are employing the buy, protect, sell model?
That's a great question. I don't know of too many. I know it's a model utilized a lot in Vermont, in Massachusetts, more commonly, and has sort of started to infiltrate its way into other regions. But it's a tricky model to sort of complete. It requires that there's funding up front to purchase farmland, so that either has to come from a government or maybe a charitable foundation who is willing to put up money up front to purchase land on the open market for protection. So in that way, it's been a challenging model, I think, to recreate across the country and on a large scale. But there are some good examples out of Vermont in particular where this model has been used quite extensively. I would just add too, more and more land trusts are utilizing the preemptive purchase right, which is something that is relatively new in New York State. I think something like 5 or 7 years old, and it is a tool that is used when we do state farmland protection projects sometimes, and more land trusts in New York, and particularly in our region, recognize the value that it has for our local farming community. So that seems to be increasingly looked at as a good option to include in a conservation project when it's appropriate.
Fantastic. This is a question for both Sam and for Blake. Wanting to just know, in your words, why partnerships like these between the Hussman Hollow Flower Farm and CLC to create affordable farmland are so important.
Should I go first?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the number one thing, at least from my end of it, of just being on the grower aspect of it, is just access to land is in the most important thing, that we don't have a business without that, and it's not easy to find that. And so anytime you're able to kind of have access, like secure access to land is kind of invaluable, and it's super important. And for us, before this opportunity, we were working with the landowner was great. However, we were struggling for not for any reason other than just like and they didn't want to offer long-term leases for their own reasons, and so that made it hard for us to kind of like find the reason and to invest certain things for our business that we wanted and needed, or even to secure. There were certain grants that were available, but you had to prove long-term leasing things that we didn't have access to, and so that can be inhibitive or prohibitive to certain aspects of the business. But then also just the uncertainty of a lot of landowners like the idea of a farmer being there, but they're again not really willing to commit to that happening. And so there's this like, yeah, we'll give you a lease, but it's a year-to-year, a 2 or 3 year lease where they can constantly reevaluate. And so again, it's kind of hard when you're like, all right, I can't really invest in something for 3 years. Hopefully it will work out, but things change. They might not own the property anymore, whatever. And so there's just like this uncertainty that can kind of make it really hard to invest in that. So like offering, CLC offering something like this to us just kind of really offers us security, and then kind of like really fix and we can really kind of hone in on what we want to do, because we don't have to worry about losing our access to land. And so that is in itself invaluable for sure.
Yeah, I would echo Blake and just say, like, the single greatest challenge I think I've heard about from farmers in working with them over the past couple of years on farmland access work is cost of farmland in our region is just essentially prohibitive in a lot of cases. particularly among newer or younger farmers who might not have, access to a family farm or something like that. And to the, the ability to present something like secure land tenure to a farmer at a price like this is like just really unique. I'd also say we know that local farmers want this kind of opportunity because we got 10 proposals and dozens more inquiries about this property. And so I think there's no risk in terms of, will we find a farmer to buy this land? That they're out there, and they I believe they're sort of eager for an opportunity like this, a lot of them. So there's clearly a need.
Definitely.
Well, we are I can't believe it's already been an hour. This has been such an engaging and really exciting conversation to hear from both you, Blake, and Sam. Unfortunately, our time has come to an end. I just want to say thank you again for sharing your knowledge, your experience with us. And I want to thank everyone on the call for taking a slice of your Tuesday night to spend some time here with us with CLC. The entire event, it was all recorded. Yes, we'll give a round of applause to our speakers. The event was recorded, so we will be sending that out to all of you and for folks who might not have been able to join us tonight. And we're going to be linking to other resources, to Blake's farm, some of the things that Sam mentioned. So we'll have all of that compiled for you really neatly in an email that'll come out later this week. And gratitude is coming through in the chat. So again, I'll give a round of applause to Blake and Sam. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And I hope everybody in the call has a wonderful night. Take care, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.